The opioid trial is over, the compact issue just beginning. Our guest this morning, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, Mike Hunter. It's all next. It's Mitchell Talks, the News 9 Sessions with Aaron Brillbeck. Hey, look who's here, Mr. Brillbeck, Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma.
Wow.
So we're talking about the trial being over and this compact issue. We're trying to dig into that. Welcome, General. Good to have you here.
Good to be with you, always.
Give us the analysis from what, there was so much going on this week in terms of in Washington, and everybody now is an analysis of what just happened. So could you help us understand what just happened?
Are we talking about the opioid litigation
opioid trial,
or the Mueller testimony?
All of the above.
Okay. Well, it's my practice not to talk about things that I don't know about, so I'm going to hold off on any commentary on Bob Mueller's testimony, if that's okay. The trial concluded, I guess, a week ago Monday with our closing arguments. We felt strongly that we provided the judge everything that we intended to. With regard to the defendant's approach to the trial, we didn't really understand. The three top experts that they brought to the judge all essentially recanted their support of the defendants based on previous lectures that they'd given. Their main guy actually had written a paper after he left the employ of Johnson & Johnson in which he and others blamed opioid manufacturers for the epidemic. So at the end of the day, we thought our witnesses did a great job. We thought that the, again, cross-examination that our team was able to bring to the case when the defendant's witnesses were on the stand was just exemplary. So we were prepared. 7 weeks of legal hand-to-hand combat, and we're waiting for a decision from the judge just next month. So we'll see what happens. We feel pretty confident about where we'll end up.
The basis for the suit was that they created a public nuisance by the way that they were advertising these opioids, promoting them to doctors. Doctors have known since the 1500s that opioids are addictive. So how do we make the claim that doctors were duped into believing they're not as addictive as they are?
Well, there were 4 principal reasons for our position that they were the kingpin behind the epidemic. One is they provided, for almost 2 decades, most of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, pharmaceutical opioids, for the rest of the industry. So not only did they sell opioids, but they made money off of everybody else's sale of opioids. They bought a poppy farm down in Tasmania before all this started. And in many ways, you could attribute the beginning of the epidemic to their decision to start that poppy farm and provide the rest of the industry with opium. So number one. Number two, they collaborated with the industry to head off any kind of policy changes that would have mitigated the results of the epidemic. There's a lot of evidence that substantiated that. Their marketing, how they sold their drugs, how they promoted them, was fraudulent. They misrepresented the addictive qualities, and for decades, Aaron, doctors had been able to rely on in a faithful fashion, the fact that, or the track record that pharmaceutical companies had. Here are our studies, we've tested it, we've studied it, these drugs are safe. They didn't do that with opioids. In fact, there still is no definitive study that tells you the extent to which you're exposed to becoming addicted when you're prescribed an opioid. And the best data that we think is out there, and a lot of experts agree with this, your chances are 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 to become addicted, even if you go to a doctor and you're properly prescribed opioids. So we think that they've been inappropriate, they've always been inappropriate for chronic pain, but the extent to which this brainwashing exercise went on as a result of millions of dollars that Johnson & Johnson and others spent is the root cause of the epidemic.
Since the closing arguments, Oklahoma County has jumped on the bandwagon along with 50 other municipalities in Oklahoma, also suing opioid manufacturers. Isn't there a redundancy here? In other words, the money that the state's going to be collecting, you're asking for $17.5 billion. Shouldn't that also cover the cost of what the municipalities are claiming, or are they looking for the deepest pockets?
Well, our original approach was to seek both damages, which are in the nature of what's happened in the past, as well as to try to approach this with our public nuisance theory. So as we got into the case, it was clear to us that the strongest cause of action that we had against the defendants was public nuisance. They created a situation where hundreds of thousands of Oklahomans were being harmed, and that harm is going to continue into the future. And public nuisance law allows you to present that to a judge and allow the judge to fashion a remedy, which is the $17.5 billion over 30 years that we think is necessary to fix what's going on in the state. So with regard to municipalities, with regard to counties, it was part of the testimony in our case that there aren't going to be unfunded mandates to cities and counties as a result of this. But there is an opportunity for damages to be recovered as a part of individual lawsuits on the part of cities and counties, as well as participating in the MDL, the multi-district litigation in Ohio.
Can I ask you kind of a journalism question about what just happened? We just saw the Mueller hearing, and a person could watch that all day long without any button, no gatekeeper telling you what you just looked at, right?
Yeah.
So the morning, when you turn on Fox News the next day versus MSNBC, you wonder, what were they watching? It wasn't the same thing, right? This trial was streamed. There were cameras in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Nobody had to listen to some writer telling them, here's what to think about this. Your thought about how cameras in the courtroom with this trial will impact not only this particular case for the public perception of this, but also for justice down the road.
I can't say enough about the thoughtfulness and sense of responsibility, public responsibility that the judge exercised in this case. A lot at stake here. A lot of folks are referring to this as the most historic trial in the history of the state. And so Judge Bachman's decision to allow cameras in the courtroom to make sure that not only Oklahomans, but the rest of the world, if you will, had access to every witness's testimony, everything that was going on in the courtroom, I really think was an inspired decision. So as you say, none of this is filtered. You don't have to listen to opinions on multiple stations to find out what happened. You could watch it firsthand.
Let me take a different direction. We'll talk about the Indian Gaming Complex really quickly.
I think that in a thoughtful way, we can sit down with the tribes, we can look at the compact, and we can collectively decide what our commercial objectives are, both the tribes as well as the state, and come up with an agreement that's in everybody's best interest before we get to the end of the year. So I'm optimistic about it all working out. Our office has been the lead for the state in most of the negotiations with the tribes, and we've got relationships that I think will benefit the state's efforts here.
The language is pretty clear, though. I mean, it says that the compact shall automatically renew for successive additional 15 years if there's other legislation that is involved with gaming, which obviously there has been. Remington Park, the legislature has done a lot of tweaking here and there. So doesn't that make this compact renew?
Are you asking for my legal opinion?
Yep.
My legal opinion is that we can work out issues in connection with this compact, including any kind of uncertainty about automatic renewal in the context of a global negotiation that looks at those terms and also looks at, again, what our respective commercial objectives are, develop a consensus, get the amendments enacted and incorporated, and go on down the road.
And important to note, too, we can still renegotiate the amount of money the state's receiving without changing the entire compact, right?
So this compact applies to each of the tribes that are involved in gaming. So the complexity of getting everybody around the table sort of speaks for itself. But again, we were successful in getting a compact during Governor Henry's term. And I'm confident, again, given the relationship that we have with the tribes, given what we smart Alecks call the comity, not comedy, that exists, I'm confident that we'll get something worked out. How you start is not necessarily how you end up. And where we end up, I think, is going to be a function of, again, our office getting involved, sitting down with the tribes and getting something worked out.
General, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, always. Thanks for putting me on.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for watching. See this again at news9.com/YourVoteCounts. Follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.